agony, pain, sorrow, anger. These were emotions that Wednesday were familiar with, but not like this, never like this. She was used to seeing the ones she had tortured exhibit them, she would revel in them. Like bittersweet desserts she would feast upon, but now she could feel the visceral wounds it left upon her as Enid ran away, away from her. Yoko looked helplessly at Wednesday. Noticing the Raven Goth's hand was shaking. She couldn't help but feel it was her fault somewhat. Enid was incredibly clingy, more so since Wednesday had returned. She should have waited for Enid's werewolf instincts to protect to simmer down. The werewolf had obviously followed them and overheard some of their conversation. Wednesday looked at her, eyes thunderous, her fingers literally itching to wrap themselves around her new angel blade and plunge it into the vampire's heart. But she relented. If not for her, or herself, but for Enid. Go to her, Wednesday, Yoko implored. Why? Wednesday questioned. Her voice sounded dead, dull, lacking the subtle mockery that would lace her tone. She ran away from me, that tells me all I need to know. Wednesday downcast her eyes. The demon stood, heartbroken. Yoko wanted to rip her hair out in frustration. Oh, for fuck's sake, get a grip! Yoko hurled at the demon. Wednesday rose her head sharply. Like an owl, she stared at her, murder intent in her eyes. Do you know what I saw this week, Wednesday? I saw that girl, that bright, bubbly puppy of a girl pine her heart out for you. I watched her mourn for you. I watched her cry her heart out for you. She was dying, just so she could be reunited with you, but she ran dash. Yoko interrupted her. She was overwhelmed. Go talk to her, Yoko said before adding. Jesus, couples would get through so much shit if they just talked to each other, she said, sighing in exasperation. Wednesday nodded. Her eyes shifted to the door. Taking a deep breath, she moved her way to it, stepping through and following the wolf, through corridors and causeways before reaching the stairway to the Ophelia Hall dorm. This was like the third time Wednesday had found her facing the monolithic stairway, and what they represented to her. She was reminded of Sisyphus, rolling the boulder up a hill for eternity. The stairway, it seemed, was her hill and Enid the boulder. As she ascended, she could feel anxiety creep into her stomach. If Enid rejected her, she would not survive. She would find a way to erase herself from existence. The pain that would last for an eternity would be unbearable, and it would drive her insane. One of the Watchers, who fell in love with a human, was eventually rejected by the human after a blissful relationship. In a rage of sorrow and grief, that Watcher had ripped her in half, declaring that no one could claim her. And when his rage had tempered and he was himself again, he was horrified to learn of his action, an action that had torn his beloved away from him forever. And in his grief, started a fight with another Watcher who killed him. Humans went to heaven or hell. Supernatural creatures either went to heaven or purgatory. Purgatory was a realm where the ones who had become monsters were sent, to dwell, to hunt and feast upon each other for an eternity. But no one knew where angels or demons would go after their own demise. It was one of the great mysteries that they were not privy to. Not even the archangels themselves, her father and her father alone, knew of where they would go. But right now, all that mattered was what lay beyond the door. She didn't know what she would find. She took a deep breath and her hand reached out for the door knob and she let it turn, the metal within groaning slightly as she twisted. She pushed the dark mahogany door open. It creaked as she did so. It seemed so loud, so raw. The door slammed behind her. There was a blur of color as it leapt at her with a roar of fury. Wednesday felt herself be tackled to the floor, her back harshly hitting the floor, sending up specks of dust. There above her was Enid. Her face was furious, canines had grown in length. Her eyes had turned a glowing yellow with a tinge of orange. Enid's left hand, the hand that she was holding just hours before, was grasping the collar of her clothing in a death grip. The other hand was raised high above her head. Claws extended. All it would take was a single downward swipe and it would be all over for her. It would be a fitting way for her to die, killed by the one she cherished the most in the universe. Enid scowled down at her, her chest heaving. I told you not to come any closer, she growled. Wednesday lay unmoving beneath her, unfazed. She wasn't afraid to die, she was afraid to live in a world where her love rejected her. Actually, you leapt at me and pinned me to the floor, Wednesday deadpanned. The wolf didn't appreciate the snark and growled in response, baring her canines threateningly. Wednesday was entranced. She was so beautiful and deadly. Cute, but she could rip your face off in seconds if she wanted to. What a deadly combination. Do it, Wednesday uttered, her eyes staying fixed upon Enid. Enid nearly recoiled in shock, not expecting this. What? She asked. The arm raised above her head faltered a little, lowering slightly in hesitation. Do it, Wednesday repeated. If this is what you want, then do it. Take me out of a world that has you in it. Wednesday whispered. Her eyes glistened. Just allow me to look upon you, one final time. Wednesday almost begged. Let me die looking at paradise. Enid searched Wednesday's eyes for any hint of a lie or falsehood. Her words stunned her, more than they should have, but she found no lie, just truth that was tipped with barbs. Enid's hold on the Goth's collar slackened and she almost pulled away, the arm above her head lowered until it was level with her own head before dropping completely, claws retreating back into her hands. I don't know what I'm doing. Enid's lip quivered as she fell backwards. I'm sorry, Wella. I'm so sorry. Enid choked out as she retreated backwards on her bum until she hit the wall, drawing her knees up and wrapping her arms round them. Wednesday recognized this posture. It was the one she assumed every time she had somehow disappointed Esther for one inane reason or another, reasons that usually resulted in physical abuse. Wednesday softly moved over to Enid. She noticed tear streaks rolling down her face at an alarming rate. Wednesday raised her hand timidly before placing it on her back. Enid flinched violently, like she was going to be. Wednesday was ready to kill Esther Sinclair. Are you going to hurt me? Enid whispered, an eye peering at Wednesday from beneath her arms. Or more to the point, peering at the arm that was touching her. Never, Wednesday said fiercely. Every bit of trauma that Enid exhibited would be another nail in Esther Sinclair's eventual coffin. She swore it to everything, as sure of herself as she was sure the sun would rise and the sun would set. A set of disbelieving eyes met hers, tinged red with crying, but mostly she looked scared. But you tortured people, Wednesday, Enid uttered. Wednesday stiffened, so that was what it was. She was scared of her, scared of who she had been once before. Her eyes shifted to look at Enid again. Oh, she wasn't going to like it when she found out that Wednesday had been torturing her mother. You came to me as a raven, Wella, they symbolize death, Enid said. Wednesday could hear the fear laced in her voice. But wolves in the wild are often accompanied by ravens. Their relationship is symbiotic, Enid. But ours is so much more than words, so much more than fate, so much more than everything. Wednesday said. She dared to place her hand on the top of Enid's knee gently. Do you think, even if you hated me or despised me, that I would love you any less? She whispered, moving closer to the wolf. Enid wanted desperately to take Wednesday's hand with her own. She could see nothing but sincerity in the girl's eyes. So why did you come to me, Wednesday? Enid asked. Her gaze pierced every crevice of the demon. She could feel it to her core. I need the truth, please. Enid's eyes were like hearts, and Wednesday felt her resolve crumble away. She sighed. She hated where this conversation was going, but she could nothing to avoid it. A bit more time would have sufficed. Then let me explain? There is a lot I have to tell you, and you're not gonna like some of it. Enid nodded and moved so that she was sitting across from Wednesday, ears perked up ready to pay attention. Wednesday wondered where to begin as silence crept in on them. She placed her own hands on her knees, steeling her gaze and hardening her heart, just in case this went poorly. What I am is complicated, Wednesday began. I look 16, but in reality my age is measured by eras rather than years, decades, or even millennia. I once lived in a place that was beautiful, full of light. I rebelled because my father, she seethed the word, wanted me to love something that I believed I could not love. What was that, Willa? She said with a hushed whisper. Humans, humanity, Wednesday said, eyes looking away in shame. Enid's eyes held too much forgiveness for her to bear the weight of looking at them. I joined a war against him and we lost. I and others of our kind were exiled to a dark place. And honestly, I do not know what I am anymore. I used to be involved in some of the most exquisite applications of pain that any human could ever experience. I would tear, slice, and carve my way through hundreds of them every day. I was content. I was feared. Enid shifted uncomfortably. Hearing about people getting tortured was not her thing, but her eyes never left Wednesday's. My kind can look upon the earth to any human that is in pain, mentally or physically, but only when they experience it in the moment. Enid felt her blood freeze. Wednesday's piercing gaze met hers. And that's when I saw you for the first time, Enid. Wednesday's eyes softened. Impossibly so, losing their sharpness, and Enid swears on everything she saw a brief pale blue shimmer shine in her eyes. For the first time in my very long existence, I did not find joy in pain or anguish. You were 14 and your mother. Wednesday hurled the title from her mouth like it was poison. Was abusing you, she hit you. Wednesday's eyes became fixated to Enid, who nearly faltered from her intense gaze. And in that moment, I desired, I yearned for nothing more than to comfort this beautiful creature in the throes of agony. I wanted nothing more than to bring you into my arms and cradle you as the most precious jewel in existence. Enid's face was awash with silent tears. They rolled, unbidden, down the said beautiful creature's cheek. Wednesday laughed bitterly. Of everything in the universe that I could come to cherish and adore in all of time, all of space, it would be you, my Enid Sinclair. Wednesday stepped closer to her. I watched you every day. I saw as your mother continued to defile you, with her words, with her fists. By the end of the first month I had enough, and I vowed I would protect you. Enid was shaking now, but her eyes never left the demons. So how did it take you 2 years, Wella? Enid asked, her voice hoarse. The place I came from. It was like a prison, one that was meant to inescapable. Especially to ones as powerful as I. I waged war there for 2 years so I could get out. I fought, I bled, I had to fight every single second, to kill, to slaughter. I suffered walking through the plains of holy fire. I fought the army of Leviathan and the nameless atrocities. I even killed my own brothers. The things I did, the things I saw. By the end my suffering was so great and so cosmic, I was on my hands and knees, because I had to get to you. Wednesday said, her eyes faltering as she witnessed things even demons would suffer mentally from. She could still feel the holy fire that had nearly turned her grace to cinders. Enid had stood up, hands clasped in front of her chest, eyes wide and pleading, because there was still something Wednesday was not telling her. I crawled my way out of hell for you, Enid, Wednesday said, stepping closer. Because I love you. I have loved you from the moment I laid my eyes on you, Wednesday said before adding, my furball of a puppy. She finished, letting her lips tug upwards in amusement briefly. Enid choked out a laugh. Wella, you didn't have to dash. Wednesday interrupted her by holding up a hand. Yes, I did. I saw the universe be made. I watched stars set alight for the first time. I watched the majesty of creation come to be, and yet it all means nothing because none of it could ever compare to you. How could I not safeguard the most precious thing that will ever exist? Enid surged forwards, her hands coming to grab Wednesday's clothing by the lapels before pressing her lips to the Goth's. Their eyes closed to savor this moment. Both grace and soul united and fate rejoiced. The soul of a human and the grace of a fallen angel had become one. Enid deepened the kiss, lips moving in tandem, either of them able to get enough of the other. Enid growled softly, as her hands slithered to the base of Wednesday's neck, keeping her in place, intent in devouring her mate with affection and love. I love you, Willa, Enid whispered, pulling away briefly. Wednesday chased her lips and reaffirmed them on her own, their kisses short, sweet, desperate, needy. Enid pulled back to rub her nose against Wednesday's before rubbing against her cheek, her mouth agape, the scenting of her mate, sending ripples of pleasure coursing through her, making her feel drunk. Enid! You corrupt me so, you devil! Wednesday whispered, letting her mouth linger against Enid's cheek. But I am not worthy of your affections. Enid pulled back to look Wednesday in the eyes. Why? Because you're a demon? Enid asked, eyes narrowed. Wednesday had the gall to almost look ashamed, bowing her head. Yes, and because I am much older than you. Enid hummed happily in response. Good, because I love an older woman. Enid teased, winking at Wednesday. That wink had no business setting her heart aflame, blush rushing up her cheeks and sending ripples to her core. Fuck, she was doomed. Evil is my religion, she replied. I can convert. Enid shrugged nonchalantly. We'll bask in pain and sadness, looking forward to it, Enid replied, smiling from ear to ear. Only darkness and danger do I advertise, really? Then sign me up. Enid giggled. Wednesday paused, huffing with indignation. You're incorrigible, so they tell me, Enid replied, reaching out a hand to take Wednesday's smaller hand in her own. You're like a pestilence that one can't get rid of, like the plague. Good, because I don't plan on going anywhere, Enid teased. But it reminded Wednesday that Enid would die one day from natural causes. She was powerful, she was intelligent, she was a treasure trove of knowledge, but she knew nothing about immortality. That was her father's closest secret. Even Michael knew nothing of it. Enid looked at her watch, noticing the time. Shall we go down for dinner? I am totes starving. Enid said, vibrating with excitement. The wolf was always hungry. We shall. Wednesday opened their door and gestured for Enid to walk through, who beamed as she walked past, letting the door to their room close gently as they left. Line break, there was several flashes of lightning, followed by thunderous roars as a stranger appeared before the angel warding of Nevermore. His wings unfurled behind his back as they were made of molten fire. His wings drizzled small lines of lava as he walked, burning a trail as he went. He stopped in front of the angel warding. He chuckled darkly. My, whatever will those hairless monkeys come up with next? The stranger said as he examined the barrier. It was impressive, for humans or their hybrid variants, no matter. He snapped his fingers and the barrier cracked and shattered before him, and he continued to walk on through the fields. He took a deep breath. The air here was fresh and not filled with flakes of ash. It was a gorgeous evening, he mused, pausing to watch the sun make a slow descent in a sky cast with whimsical shades of reds and oranges with a tinge of blue, indicating the coming darkness. As he continued his march, he snapped his fingers again. The barrier reappeared at full strength. His wing furled away into his back, ceasing the lava trails that followed him. He cracked his neck. It had been so long since he had stowed his wings that he forgot what it was like to have them stowed away. His back felt full and burdensome. He wondered how other angels coped. He moved on, paying it no heed, his hands thrust deep in his pockets as his eyes admired the flora and the fauna that grew here. A squirrel scurried and bounced along in a tree, and the stranger looked up, letting a smile tug at his lips. Squirrels were always one of his favorite. He held up his hand towards the branch and the squirrel bounced down his arm, his smile ever more wide and gentle. Hey there, little guy, he said as the squirrel settled on his shoulder. Look what I got for you, my little friend. In his hands was the biggest nut the squirrel had ever seen. Its eyes widened at the size of the treat. The stranger chuckled as the squirrel, Jerry, he decided to call it, took the oversized nut in its ever so tiny little hands as the stranger scratched underneath its chin. He picked up the squirrel and placed it back on the branch, and continued on his walk. Nevermore could be seen peeking through the trees. The smile that graced his lips turned into a nasty scowl that would put Wednesday to shame as he watched the cockroaches scurry about in their self-obsessed worlds. He watched as some openly fornicated with their mouths in the inner courtyard as he moved through it. He wasn't invisible, just unnoticeable. All it would take was a snap of his fingers and they would explode in a shower of blood and bone. But alas, he relented, smiting of some humans, and the filthy hybrids were not on his agenda today. He had family business to take care of. Wednesday was sat in the dining hall when her grace spiked at the sudden arrival of the stranger. She stiffened, so noticeable that Enid had stopped mid-ramble. Wednesday. You okay? Wednesday turned almost panicked eyes to her beloved. He couldn't be here. It should be impossible. But her grace did not lie to her. She could feel the presence make its way to their shared dorm. Enid, it is imperative you stay here, Wednesday said desperately. Her fear was evident, and Wednesday was never scared. Enid, seeing the look Wednesday was giving her, nodded. Sure, but what is it? She couldn't help but ask. It's better if you don't know, believe me. She unsheathed her angel blade before kissing her passionately on the mouth that sent stars dancing in Enid's vision, before darting off towards their dorm, leaving Enid breathless and intoxicated where she sat. The stranger pushed his way into the dorm and he chuckled again before he snapped his fingers and a comfy leather chair appeared in front of him, in the middle of the room, before he settled down in it, a leg draped over the side as he waited. He could hear the footsteps from where he sat, rapid in nature as they ascended the stone stairs. He smiled to himself as he waited patiently. The door burst open and there stood Wednesday, her bangs askew, and her jaw clenched. Her face enraged. Lucifer, she spat in contempt. And Lucifer smiled, giving Wednesday a short little wave by wiggling his fingers at her.